Hi, my name is Joel and I'm a member of the Teen Advisory Board with the Howard County Library System, and today I'm going to teach you about conditionals in Python. I'm also a member of the Centennial High School Pioneers, which is a school-based coding club whose goal is to help people learn how to code. Now let's get started. So, what is a conditional? Conditionals are things in programming that are used to allow programs to make decisions. On the right here, we see a diagram that represents a simple conditional. When this program starts, the first thing it does is check if it's past noon. There are two possible answers or outputs to this, either yes or no. If the answer is yes, then the program will say good afternoon. But if the answer is no, then the program will say good morning. And then after it does one of these two things, it'll end. In this example, the is it past noon box is the condition, and the two things that it can say, the good afternoon or good morning, are the possible decisions. If the condition is true, or in this case, the answer to this question is yes, it'll choose one condition. But if it's no, or in false, it'll choose the other condition. This is, in its simplest form, what a conditional is. Now, let's see how we can use conditionals in Python. First, let's take a look at if statements. If statements are the simplest conditionals you can have in Python. Here we see the syntax of an if statement. It starts with the word if, and then it has a condition. This condition has to evaluate to either true or false. In this case, we use the double equal sign, which is a Boolean operator that you should have learned about in one of the earlier videos. Just as a refresher, double equal sign evaluates to true if the two things that's in between are the same. So if the variable day is a string that says Friday, it'll evaluate to true, but otherwise it'll evaluate to false. After the condition, we have a colon, and then we have the code inside of the if statement. In this case, it is just a print command that prints Happy Friday, but you can have as many lines of code as you want in there. One key thing to notice is this white space here. This white space tells Python that this line of code is inside of this if statement. When Python eventually sees code without this white space, it'll know, oh, we're no longer inside of this if statement and the code is outside. Now let's move on to else statements. Now let's look at else statements. Else statements extend a conditional, and the code in an else statement only runs if all the prior conditions have not been met. If we look on the right, we see the same if statement that was on the last slide, but there is also an else statement underneath it. Inside this else statement, we have a print statement that prints today is not Friday. The code under this else tag will only run if the if condition is false. It's kind of like a last resort for the code if none of the above works. Let's take a look at this example in Repl.it. So here we are on Repl.it, and we see the same example that we saw on the slides before. I declared the variable day and set its value to Friday. When we run this code, the program should print Happy Friday because the variable day is equal to the string Friday. So let's just hit run, and we see just that. It prints Happy Friday. Now if we change the day and make it into anything that makes this condition false, such as Monday for example, then the else case will run because Monday is not equal to Friday. In this case, the else case is just to print today is not Friday, so if we run this and see, it'll print today is not Friday. Now let's see how we can have conditionals inside of each other. Here we see an example of a nested conditional. Nested conditionals are simply when there is a conditional inside of another conditional. The way nested conditionals are executed is, it goes through the outermost conditional first, and then it moves its way inside. When you have a nested conditional, it's very important to keep up with their indentation, because the indentation is the only thing organizing the different conditionals so the program knows which one to do first. Let's walk through what's happening in this nested conditional. First, it checks this condition. Is day equal to Friday? If this is true, then it'll run this, it'll go to this other conditional, which is inside of this if statement. If it is false, then it'll go to the else statement, just like we talked about before. And then in this else statement, we have another conditional. So depending on this output, the output of this Boolean operation, it'll choose between either of these two conditionals that are nested inside of this first conditional. If it goes to this one, it does if past noon. Since past noon is a Boolean, we can pass it directly into the if statement, and it just works. So if past noon, print happy Friday afternoon, otherwise print happy Friday morning. And then it's essentially the same thing over here. So if past noon, print it is not Friday, but it is the afternoon, otherwise print it is not Friday, but it is the morning. So we can just test this out by saying, so right now it's Friday and it is past noon, so we should expect this output, happy Friday afternoon, and if we run it, we get exactly that. But if we want it to say it is not Friday, but it is afternoon, we can change this to maybe Monday, and then leave this as true, and then we get it is not Friday, but it is the afternoon. Now, unlike separated conditionals, nested conditionals only get run if the conditional they are nested in is true. With separate conditionals, every conditional is checked and none of them are dependent on each other. So that's just something to remember when you're choosing, like when you're considering if you want to use a nested conditional or separate conditionals. You need to be able to know the difference. Now, that's pretty much nested conditionals. Let's move on. The final part of conditionals that you need to learn is Alif. Alif allows you to add more conditions to a conditional. You can have as many Alifs as you want in a conditional, as long as there is an if preceding it. You can only have one if and one else in a conditional. Here we see an example of how Alif can be used in a conditional. In this example, we have two Alif statements and an if statement which totals to 3 different conditions. We also have an else case that runs if all else fails. The way Python reads this conditional is, first it checks the if condition. If this condition is true, it'll print happy Friday, and then it'll ignore everything else here. This is the big difference between using elifs and making new conditionals with new if statements. If you use elifs and one of your conditions is true, for example, if this conditional is true, then none of these will get checked. They'll just be completely ignored. If you have multiple if statements instead, all of them are guaranteed to be checked. Anyways, after it checks the if statement, if the if statement is false, it'll move on to this elif statement. It'll check this condition, and if this condition is true, it'll print happy Monday, but if it's false, it'll move on to the next elif. And just like the last one, if the condition is true, it'll print out hump day. Otherwise, if it's false, it'll go to the default else case, which in this case it is gonna say today is not Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. You can see here that if we put any day, right now it's Friday, and we run it, it says happy Friday. But if we set this to Monday, then we get the expected result for Monday, which is happy Monday. And if we change it to, let's say, Thursday, which is not one of our conditions, it'll just say today is not Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. So now that you've seen conditionals in action, let's see what you've learned through a challenge. Alright, before we end the video, I have one challenge for you to complete. I want you to pause the video, try this out, and then come back and we'll go over the answer. So here's the challenge. Given an integer x, create a conditional that prints high if x is greater than 5, low if x is less than 5, and same if x is equal to 5. I'll give you a second to do that. And by now I hope you've paused the video, tried this out for yourself, And now we can go over the answer. So first thing we have to do is create a variable x. For now we can just say, let's make it equal to 5. And we can start a conditional. So it's a conditional, so it's going to start with if. And then the first condition it has here is if x is greater than 5, print high. So I'm going to start off with that. If x is greater than 5, print high. There we go. So that should work, but we need to do the rest of the problem. So the next thing is if x is less than 5, print low. Since it's another condition, we want to use elif. So elif x is less than 5, print low. And then finally, print same if x is equal to 5. Well, if x is not greater than 5 and x is not lower than 5, then x has to be equal to 5. So we don't even need to have a condition here. We can just say else print same. Now if we run this, right now x is equal to 5, so we should get same. And we see that if we make it less than 5, like 3, and run it, we get low. If we make it higher, like maybe 100, we get high. So that pretty much wraps it up for this video. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.